The stage is set, and the actors are in place for this Machiavellian plot to unfold. While the rabble are busy squabbling on the cobblestones over the distribution of crumbs, the select few gorge themselves to the point of bursting, and still make but an imperceptible dent in their never-ending banquet. The global elite and world governments are quite good at diverting attention from their planetary theft, feeding the proletariat a diet of trinkets, frivolous entertainment, and ideological dead ends. All the while, their evil deeds and unmitigated greed goes on, largely unchecked. When will the people wake up?
Cut! What the hell was that?
You didn't like it? It was my criticism of modern society.
Oh, was it? Well, it sounded like a bunch of gobbledygook to me. No offense. Now, don't worry. I think I can salvage it.
Okay.
Here, read this.
The stage is set, and so are the actors. While the people fight on the streets over bread, the rich eat until they are full. But there is still so much food left. The rich are quite good at distraction and give people things, entertainment, and political debate. I don't know. This seems to lack any teeth. And I'm not sure you carried over the spirit of what I was trying to say.
But that just shows how difficult your original was to follow. What the hell does Machiavellian even mean? It would have gone over the head of the average person. What is the point of using fancy words that no one will understand? Okay, I have an idea. Maybe you should cut out all of that colorful language at the beginning and just go straight to your main point. Here, right there.
All right, let's see. The global elite and world government are quite good.
Cut!
What now?
No, that was perfect. I think that last one was the ticket. Clear, easy to understand, and to the point.
Newspeak. For those who are unfamiliar with George Orwell's novel 1984, Newspeak was the brainchild of the fictional authoritarian government, and it was their attempt to limit the people's rebellious thoughts by watering down the potency of the vocabulary. Ironically, I have heard people mistakenly use a term which takes George Orwell's concept of doublethink and smashes it together with newspeak to form doublespeak, a word that George Orwell never actually used, but has now found a permanent place in our dictionary. And why is this significant? Well, doublethink is the idea that a person can hold two diametrically opposed ideas in their mind at the same time. It is meant to illustrate that these people are not using their reason or critical thinking, and rather just lapping up oxymoronic state propaganda, utterly oblivious to the fact that they fully believe in two contradictory ideologies. And what would doublespeak mean? Well, it is basically synonymous with lying, hardly a novel concept. This is truly ironic because people took the word newspeak, the limiting of language as a means of control, and created the word doublespeak, which conveys no more meaning than the terms forked tongue or two-faced. Now, I'm not going to pose the question, what came first, the word or the thought, since it is plain that we must first think of something before we get around to the communication part. Still, words do help us to organize our thoughts, and we could look at our words as a shorthand for experiences and feelings. If the language is shared, then we can effectively communicate our thoughts. And the more precise the vocabulary, the more efficiently we can comprehend one another. We become painfully aware of how important words can be when we forget a crucial one. Some words have an easy equivalent, and a readily available substitute may be used, but others are nearly irreplaceable. For example, only a few moments ago I used the word ironic, and it would have complicated things to not have that word, since it is fairly unique in its meaning. Additionally, the term sarcasm holds a lot of value, since it is widely used and can quickly convey a complex notion. "I believe everything I hear on the news," Bryan said sarcastically. Rather than, Bryan said in a tone that gave the listener the impression he actually thought the opposite. Oh, and it was done as a scathing shot at the media giants for the potential amusement of the listener. So, are the rich and powerful actively deleting words from the Webster's Dictionary? Well, technically no, since it is much easier to simply drown a reader or listener in unclear speech, slowly conditioning people to use the more inefficient forms of communication. In the short essay, Politics and the English Language, George Orwell goes into great detail of how the journalists of 1946 were replacing more precise language for vaguer terminology in an effort to mask the true meaning of their words. I think that he would be rolling around in his grave if he knew how much worse journalism would become. At least in his time, the paper mill would churn out articles with an obscure meaning in an effort to appear impartial. Now I don't think there is even the pretense of objective reporting, since every news piece reeks of a stench left from those greasy, manipulative corporate fingers. There is another possibility, that words are artificially packed full with a false meaning to burst forth when triggered, like some malevolent jack-in-the-box. The term triggered was used on purpose here, as it is almost self-explanatory. Previously, if someone said something about another individual which caused offense, that person would become angry, enraged, vengeful, morose, or hurt. But all of these words give the impression that a personal emotion is at work here. On the other hand, triggered makes one think that the person who is triggered is being set up by some third party, rather than acting independently. A bear trap could be triggered by a paw, but the bear is not triggered, just trapped. And the trapper is not triggered, he just set up the trigger to go off in a highly predictable and controllable manner. Saying, "I am so triggered," doesn't give me the impression of genuine anger or disgust, but rather that the declarant is simply stating, "I have outsourced my opinions, and my programmer has preemptively determined that this topic will activate the following diatribe." Not exactly something that I would want to openly confess to, but I suppose we only get to choose between being a tool or a trigger. Free will is a luxury reserved for the rich. This predictability of reaction is the only way that an online troll could exist. The consistency of collective thought is such that only a handful of trigger words is needed for the target to be triggered into composing a vitriolic thesis in vehement opposition to the statements of the instigator, which would be commendable if there was an original thought to glean from all of that sound and fury. But alas, the triggered may no more be able to adapt their beliefs than a domino can choose in which direction it will fall. They are both set up to react in a predetermined way, and the option of deviation is never entertained. It is very unfortunate to have a long conversation with someone and largely agree until you mistakenly step on their trigger and watch them burn down all of that previous commonality in an effort to preserve their ideological integrity. There are some instances when the curtain appears to be momentarily pulled back to reveal the true nature of those in power. The corporate term human resources is one such slip-up. I suppose that it is assumed that this is a resource for humans, but that doesn't make much sense, since it is a sector of the corporation, and the resource is really just for employees. So why not just call it employee resources? Wouldn't that be more accurate? Well, actually no, because you are the resource. You are being cultivated for your productivity. Timber is a resource. Nickel is a resource. Oil and natural gas is a resource. And human labor is a resource. Thus, we have human resources, or the more trendy HR. So getting back on track, with the majority of mouths full of LOL, LMFAO, woke, legit, OMG, and a litany of other colloquial words and expressions, is there any room left for the words necessary to describe the ongoing geopolitical proxy wars, the mechanisms of fiat currency, or the feasibility of our democratic governments, and whether they are currently functioning for the good of the people. If we lack the articulation to cogently argue the fallacies of our leadership, then the elites have already succeeded in creating newspeak. I think that it's important to note here that language skills are not exactly related to intelligence. Certainly, an intellectual deficit can hamper one's ability to communicate effectively, but any person of an average intellect can use elaborate language if they are regularly exposed to it. This is precisely how pseudo-intellectualism can arise, because they have remembered the jargon, but they have left behind the inherent meaning that goes along with it. It reminds me of the old adage, he uses the most amount of words to convey the least amount of thought, which is especially true of liars and imbeciles. On the other hand, a person with a limited but practical vocabulary can still effectively communicate complex ideas. It comes down to the efficiency of their craft. As George Eliot said, the finest language is mostly made up of simple, unimposing words. Or Leonardo da Vinci, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. When we speak of limiting words from our vocabulary, many will likely assume that the ones on the chopping block are the incredibly complex terms, which only a few elite linguists would be familiar with. However, eliminating a word like discombobulated would have very little societal impact, unlike the word hate, for example. Hate was not referred to by accident here, since in 1984 there would be 2 minutes of hate set aside to collectively rage against the enemies of the state. For any good dictatorship recognizes the value of a government-sanctioned scapegoat, for the populace to heap their hate upon, lest the anger turns on the ones truly responsible. Also, in Ira Levin's This Perfect Day, the heavily medicated masses were forbade from using the terms hate or fight, since the seeds of aggression may quickly grow out of control. The individuals who first sought to ban hate speech must have been fans of the aforementioned novels, but they simply got their protagonists confused. But hate is not the only simple term with a strong meaning. In fact, most of the strongest words in our language are short and simple, but pack a serious punch. But words that pack a punch are loathsome to the ruling class, and their meanings must be managed. It reminds me of a George Carlin joke about how the World War I term for shell-shocked got downgraded to battle fatigue in World War II, and then to operational exhaustion in the Korean War, finally to post-traumatic stress disorder in the Vietnam War, using the most amount of words to convey the least amount of thought. Remember that neutering our words is the means, but the end goal is to control thought, or at the very least to limit the damage caused by independent thinkers. For specific language may lead to precision of thought, which could in turn be wielded into a pointed criticism of the powerful. So in conclusion, let us use our words for the sincere exchange of ideas, and be vigilant against terms being loaded with disruptive intent. For the majority of humanity, meaningful communication is essential for our survival. But for the global power brokers, confusion is essential for theirs. The global elite and world government are quite good. The global elite and world government are quite good.